All right, everyone, it is 6 o'clock, so I am going to call this study session to order and ask for roll call.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Armendariz is absent. Councilmember Bracco?
Here.
Councilmember Klein?
Here.
Councilmember Hilton is absent. Councilmember Marks is absent. Councilmember Tovar?
Here.
And Mayor Blanker.
Here. Okay, this is a study session for the proposed ordinance adding Chapter 16B, sidewalk vending, to the Gilroy City Code. Do we have okay. Staff report by John.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. John Biggs with your Community Development Department. Hope you're enjoying your summer. We're having a nice summer evening and talking about sidewalk vending again. You last took this up at your meeting of the July 10th City Council meeting, and at that time you had a number of changes or modifications to the ordinance that you moved forward, and you asked staff to incorporate those into a revised ordinance that we have done, and are going to be going over those with you this evening. And so that is what my PowerPoint presentation is about. We'll also give Mr. Klein an opportunity to go over his recommendations for changes to the ordinance. He brought those up at the last City Council meeting and has a few more changes as well. And then we'll go over briefly the process that we anticipate for the steps moving forward with the permitting of sidewalk vending. So if we could get the PowerPoint on the screen, we'll move forward with the presentation. There we go. So we went over the July 10th council meeting. So these are a series of changes or modifications to the code. The first modification was to subsection 16B.3. This was regarding the possession of animals. It was more of a typographical change. The underline is the new language. The crossed out is the old language. So we swapped out service for leashed in this example. Then we move on to the 16B.3A7, which is in regards to signage for sidewalk vendors. We added some language to the sidewalk vending sign regulations that say that the signage can be no larger than the vending device itself. So that would be the restriction on signage for sidewalk vendors. Then there was a question about whether we could introduce a requirement or a standard that would prohibit or limit the distance between either a generator or a vendor that was using smoke, or we included steam as well, from outdoor seating, and we also put in the openings into buildings. And the language that we've added is what you see up on the board. The 10 feet that you're seeing is a portion of the mechanical code, so that's where that particular distance came from, but we can discuss as we go through these whether or not you feel that that's an appropriate distance. Moving on, you asked that we clarify the distance that a sidewalk vendor would have to be from a number of locations in businesses or different places in the downtown. And we thought that 48 inches would be an appropriate distance to maintain. However, because of there's a whole variety of various accessibility requirements and building code requirements that call out different distances. Sometimes they're a little bit less than the 48 inches we have in the code. We put this clarifier in language to say unless that 48 inches conflicts with federal, state, or local regulations. And then to clarify the insurance requirements for a sidewalk vendor, before we had just the insurance policy, the general liability workers' compensation insurance, we included the automobile and workers' compensation insurance policies to make it clear that those would be insurance requirements of a vendor here in Gilroy. And then that brings us to the written edits from Councilmember Klein that we have given to the City Council. He's recommending a change to Section 16B.2, and I don't know, Mr. Klein, if you want to go through those, or I can just go down the list. The addition to the definitions section to add temporary special permit and enforcement official definitions. To modify sidewalk vending standards, number 3, which is in regards to accessibility. Number 4, a change to the shade structure standards. Number 13, a change to that particular subsection regarding the display of permits. and then a change to section number 20 in reasonable congestion, a change to that standard. He's recommending that the information needed for sidewalk vending applications and the permit itself be expanded, and he's given you draft language on that. And then add language regarding release, indemnification, and acknowledgement requirements. From a staff standpoint, I believe that the only particular change that we would have a concern with is the addition of the temporary special permit, simply because we don't find that term used elsewhere in the code. Other than that, if the council is agreeable to the recommendations by Mr. Klein, we certainly can include those into the code and bring that back to council when you consider the ordinance for introduction.
Well, yeah, I like this, but I would really like to hear from Councilmember Klein in regards to sort of his thoughts behind the site. Thank you for the explanation.
Sure.
Just wanted to sort of in detail sort of hear where this came about and sort of what his vision is for this here.
Sure.
Thanks.
I think in talking in the discussion in the meeting, just saying that the staff used Santa Cruz's permit or their ordinance, a lot of their information, and all I took was I put them side by side, went through it, and just in my own, just looking at the different aspects of it and seeing what I saw as needed to be added. Just like, for instance, contact information for applicant and business owner to me was ambiguous. I want specific, so that's why legal name, current address, and then also these other items that would be needed for that vendor. So it was mainly trying to, again, take what they looked at and just add some of the language that I thought would help clarify it a little bit more. So I just went, kind of through each section. And that's kind of what I caught from that. That was my thought process through that.
Got it. And thank you, Councilmember Klein. And maybe this is a question for our city attorney. I know that this sort of is mirroring the Santa Cruz sort of ordinance. With these sort of changes or additions, are we setting ourselves up for any legal sort of issues down the road?
At this point, I don't see any. With these definitions, they're not changing something like prohibiting them or doing severe restrictions or something.
Right.
It's just clarifying some of the definitions.
Okay. Thank you.
And I felt that because Santa Cruz had adopted this, they had gone through quite a lengthy process, and in listening to the discussions they went through during the March of 22 meeting and just working through all these different issues, I just felt like the city already used the language. Right. So by just adding, we were just adding from a document that they had used already. So I didn't feel like there'd be a potential. There's always, I guess, but that was my, again, thought.
Yeah, and I can clarify a lot of times when there's another city that has local findings about health and safety and concerns, another jurisdiction can also rely on those health and safety findings that another jurisdiction has determined to be relevant to their ordinance.
Well, and Santa Cruz relied heavily on Santa Monica in their process because they have a lot of assets that are similar, the piers, all the things, and tourists and all that. So I think that's what Santa Cruz leaned on too, taking, like you said, from other jurisdictions and using what they've put in place. So.
Okay, Councilmember Bracco, do you have any questions on? No? Okay. So please continue. Sorry.
I have one last slide for you to talk about implementation. There we go. Implementation and anticipated dates of implementation. And again, this assumes that the council will introduce an ordinance at their meeting on August the 7th and adopt the ordinance on August the 24th, which means that the ordinance would take effect 30 days after that, September the 20th. We would want to return to the City Council with a recommendation on the fee for the permit application for the sidewalk vendors and the fee for the sidewalk vendors. We need to finalize a web page so we begin getting information out to the public about sidewalk vending and its requirements. We want to get that done around September the 15th. We also want to finalize our informational handouts and our applications. Again, we're looking at September the 15th for doing that. And then we want to coordinate our enforcement process and provide for reporting or opportunities to report violations to us so that we can begin an investigation of those, and then hold workshops on the application process. Along with county health, they told us that once the city adopted its sidewalk vending regulations, they'd be happy to come and attend workshops with us so they can meet face-to-face with potential applicants. So those will be held in the fall of 2023. And that wraps up my presentation, and I'd be happy to go back and discuss or review any of the changes that we've included or other modifications that the council would like to see.
Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
I'd like to just start with going back to the 10 feet that you said came out of the mechanical code. Is that what you
Yes.
said? Can you explain what that code is and why that would be the one that you would look to for this?
It was, the mechanical code is in regards to the mechanical operations of buildings, heating, air conditioning, vending, and so forth. And in there, the code says that a duct vent, a event that exhausts air, that's the term I was looking for, has to be at least 10 feet away from a building. So that was the starting point. And again, we think some other cities have had further or greater distances included in their code. I think there could be some health and other safety issues that we could look into. And if the council would like to see a greater distance, look to adding that greater distance into the code we bring back, but also provide the support for
What's
that.
the greater distance that you've seen?
20 feet, 25 feet.
It's still not that far, but
Just for a point of
Better,
reference,
but-
the sidewalk in the downtown generally is about 12 feet wide from I don't know if you've noticed the brick line that runs along the face of the building to the back of the curb. So double that distance if the council were to say 25 feet, for example.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of the businesses, right? You're thinking in terms of just a physical building. It's not that. And I'm thinking in terms of we issue permits to our business owners downtown to operate their businesses, including now outdoor parklets, to be able to dine there. And while it may not be the responsibility of the city to get in the middle of business competition, it certainly is, we certainly shouldn't be sabotaging our businesses. And to me, if you're going to put something that is as loud as a generator or smoke that comes from a barbecue in the vicinity of people who are trying to enjoy an outdoor dining experience, you've just sabotaged it. And so that's why I call that out, and I'm going to leave that at that for now and let the council move on with discussion, except maybe since I've got the floor, you guys. I just want to ask about the other change that we made, or that you came back with proposed in what is now number 21, I think, in that same section. Sidewalk vendors shall not block access to create reasonable congestion by maintaining a clear distance. I think we should we not include some kind of wording in there that says that the sidewalk vendor includes the line of customers and whatever is part of what is present because of that sidewalk vendor?
Well, I believe that there is another section of the code
That addresses that?
My glasses out real quick.
John, we had some diagrams that we looked at the other day on the call.
We do. I can.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that that is clear in this ordinance and clear to those applying for a permit, that whatever they create from being there counts as being within the distance.
Number 6.
Number 6?
Yes, number 6 says sidewalk vendors shall not cause onlookers, customers, or others to obstruct the accessible path of travel with persons with disabilities or the free flow or view of pedestrians or vehicular traffic.
I mean, I see that, but that doesn't sound to me exactly like 21. Is it meant to be 21?
Well, it's meant to address your comment, I think, about customers not blocking this 48-inch. I mean, 48 inches is supposed to be to minimize congestion or not allow unreasonable congestion.
But it's supposed to be from entrances, isn't it? Egress isn't?
It does include entrances and so forth. This particular one applies to the stand itself, the the little
Right.
vending space that someone would have.
So how does 6 make clear that a vendor who sets up 48 inches away from an entrance door, how does 6 make clear that customer lines cannot be within those 48 inches?
It doesn't specifically comment on the 48 inches, but it says that they cannot obstruct or the accessible path, and then the 48 inches would be the accessible path. So it kind of links to it that way. We could certainly add language in number 21 that says this would apply to the maintaining a distance of the 48 inches for customers or those waiting in a line at the vending location.
Because it already applies to like setting up tables and chairs, right? That's
Right,
got to be in
right.
the permit or not. So I'm just trying to think through all the things that could happen. Okay, I'm going to stop for now and let the rest of you, Councilmember Bracco's on the list, so he's going to go next, okay?
Yes, I didn't see the outlets downtown addressed, because they're using the city outlets that are next to the tree. They're plugging their stuff into them.
I thought you were talking about the stores.
So we need to address that somehow, that they're not allowed to use those.
You're correct. There's nothing specific in this section or this code draft that prohibits vendors from using those outlets, and we could do that if that's the direction of council.
Well, I think something needs to be said about it.
Otherwise, they're using city's electricity?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that goes without saying.
And
That we
on
should-
these pop-up shade structures, would we allow any business in town to just pop those up out in front of their buildings whenever they wanted? Or would they have to get a permit and secure it somehow so it doesn't blow away?
They would need an approval from the city in some form, whether it be an encroachment permit or some other type of approval, and they would need to demonstrate that the structure is securely fastened and would not, heavy winds would not cause that to be lifted or blown away or cause damage to persons or buildings.
So are we going to hold these folks to the same standard?
Yes, we are. That's going to be a key thing about when we're reviewing the permit application information. If somebody wants to put in one of those tents, we will be making sure that they provide sufficient weight to hold those in place and not be easily moved.
Okay. And I think we need to kind of define the sidewalk, because we have a sidewalk where you walk, and then we have the planter next to the sidewalk, which we're counting in that 12 feet.
Right.
And then there's bicycle racks and all this other stuff in between the walking portion of the sidewalk and the curb. So I think we need to be more clear. What part of the sidewalk can you block with your barbecues and stuff?
Well, you would need to occupy a portion of the sidewalk that complies with all of the standards that are in the code, the 48 inches, the appropriate distance to lamp posts, fire hydrants, and so forth. That's what this Section 21 is intended to help cover, to make sure that we maintain that accessible.
But it's confusing.
Pardon me?
It's confusing. I mean, I'm a city council member up here, and I don't understand it. So how is somebody going to understand it that wants to set up a little area?
Well, that's where our informational handouts and flyers are going to be very important in the permitting process, because they will need to demonstrate to individuals that want to open up a vending location, you need to show us and share with us where these particular city structures or facilities are at, and that you're demonstrating you can maintain the appropriate distance. I had done someone had mentioned a aerial sketch, and I was able to take a vending booth of about 6 feet by 8 feet and plop it down in numerous locations just between 5th Street and Lewis Street on either side of Monterey in the downtown. So there is space, there is room, but again, it's going to be the vendor's going to have to demonstrate to us that they're going to be in a location where they're not going to conflict with the code, and we will make sure that they don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
You can say.
All right, Councilmember Tovar, are you, oh, no, Councilmember Klein? Okay.
Well, and something I saw, again, I did a little more research and looked at Sacramento, since a lot comes from Sacramento, so I wanted to see what they did in Sacramento concerning these issues. And relating to this specific item, the way they handle it, and I can just read it, it says, how much space do I need? Talking to on this fact sheet. Pedestrians must be able to use 50% of the sidewalk or 5 feet, whichever is greater. If your car obstructs 51% of the sidewalk or does not leave 5 accessible feet, you will not be issued a permit for that location and may be eligible for administrative penalties. So they're taking the sidewalk as a whole, 50% of it has got to be accessible. And if they breach
I like that too.
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah. So it gives clarity, and it's 5 feet, so it just gives more clarity to that. And it just, instead of just 48 inches is very, is it out the front of the, from the building, or is it from the entryway? This is 50% of the sidewalk, period, especially where our sidewalks vary in depth in certain locations based on planners and everything. This is just general and specific, and that's the way they handle that.
Right. Well, the reason we used 48 inches in this instance is because we're able to go back to the ADA requirements and say that is a sufficient distance to create an area around these objects where it's not going to create unreasonable congestion. If the council would like a greater distance, we can certainly look into that. I'd be interested in taking a little closer look at Sacramento's rules to see if they were able to support that distance based on either some specific things specific to an area in Sacramento or some other reason. But we could certainly evaluate that.
Okay, Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you. And I have a few questions, and it stays in line with sort of the sidewalk, sort of, the accessibility, obviously. And, you mentioned ADA, which we talked about, obviously, and I think last time we had this discussion, it talked about, how can we be proactive with the businesses? So with that, I'm going to kind of ask these questions. I also want to respect the business owners that reached out to myself and others. But let me ask this question, because I want to make sure, because we had gotten an email with some wonderful suggestions about possible solutions, options. But as it stands today, can the city of Gilroy mandate that sidewalk vendors only locate in one area?
The city of Gilroy could, so long as we identify an appropriate health, safety, or welfare requirement for a reason why we are locating them in a specific area.
Correct.
So
right.
that's what the state law, that's the hook that the state law provides a city.
And I think that's important because, again, it may be a case-by-case basis, right? It won't be overall, the downtown, just downtown as a whole may be a health and safety issues for vendors. Again, I'm trying to see how we can utilize that if it's a case-by-case basis. I think what's important is for us to make sure our businesses know that, sort of the definition of what that entails, because if it is a health and safety concern, then I think that business can utilize that and say, hey, you know what, and it's a way, again, I'm trying to help not only our vendors but also our business owners, right? Because right now we've been told by law we cannot push vendors away. But if there's a loophole or whatever it may be.
Let's let our city attorney reply to that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay?
Please. Yeah, sorry.
I think we'd all love to do that,
Right.
or at least I
didn't
would,
know.
too.
Joey, you got to raise your hand next time.
Okay.
I didn't see you.
So clearly the statute says a local authority sidewalk vending program shall comply with all of the following standards. A local authority shall not require a sidewalk vendor to operate within specific parts of the public right-of-way, except when that restriction is directly related to objective health and safety welfare concerns. And then it goes on, but we can't really I don't see how we can do a case-by-case basis. Our ordinance is going to have certain requirements, and if we try to move them around, it would have to be applicable to, I think, the whole vending program. So we do have that restriction.
How
So
does Santa Cruz get away with it?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you.
I'm not sure how Santa Cruz gets away with it.
That goes back to the question I asked about
Let me
great
see if I could.
recommendations.
I'm going to try to rephrase
Yeah,
your
please.
Okay. I think what Councilmember Tovar is asking is, would we be able to designate a particular area, like, say, an area on Railroad, for example? Let's say the city owns a parcel of land that's vacant, and would we be able to say this is like a food court? Right? Is that
If we had the findings.
Yes.
And I would be very concerned that if we moved all the sidewalk vending people to a certain venue and we allowed other dining on sidewalks, I think that could be problematic.
You mean like outdoor dining for
Yes.
restaurants?
Yeah, I think that could be problematic. I'm not sure what Santa Cruz did, if they have a certain area. I'm not sure how they did that, but we have to be very careful because we can't push them off the sidewalks.
Right, and I guess that's why when I asked the initial question to Councilmember Klein about sort of Santa Cruz, because again, if that's possible, I think that's a great option or solution, right, so we can help our businesses, but also a location for vendors, and that's why I asked about the legal ramifications, because what I'm hearing, and from what I've heard from other cities, is that we can't mandate vendors to go to one spot unless it's a health and safety concern, and if it is, then obviously it may be a case-by-case basis, but if I'm wrong, which I hope I am, if we can, find a spot where they can do their business, and by all means, I'm open to that. But I just want to make sure what we can, because when I talk to vendors, I tell them you can't be here. They say, well, that's not true. So I'm trying to get clarification on that, because I want to make sure we're all understanding what can and cannot be said or done. So, yeah.
If I could, I just wanted to make council aware that part of this code does allow the council an opportunity to create a remedy if we do see or experience health and safety violations. Through the resolution process. We can come forward and say, there are impacts, in this given area. We need to either limit the number or limit the hours. But again, it gets back to, we need to have factual information that says that there's health and safety issues out there.
And I think this ordinance, for me, I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse, but I think passing this ordinance may now allow us to sort of, dig a little deeper into these sort of concerns. So that was part of my question. But now, regarding sort of our discussion, if this moves forward, I'm just wondering, because I'm sticking on the 48 inches in a sidewalk, because currently, obviously, unfortunately, our downtown isn't as robust as we would all like it to be, right? So, vendors can come and say, no, it's not an issue, it's not a concern, because there aren't a lot of folks downtown. But if that's the case, moving forward, if in the future our downtown becomes more, busy per se, we can always come back and amend this, can't we?
Well, I think you have the option of either amending this code or a resolution.
Yeah.
And someone brought up Santa Cruz and how it was able to restrict, vendors in certain areas of the downtown. Well, I think on certain streets in Santa Cruz, and I used to work in Pismo Beach. We had certain streets in Pismo Beach where the crowds were just so heavy in the afternoons or even in the morning time that putting a sidewalk vendor on the side, we were having issues with people having to walk into the streets anyway. Putting a sidewalk vendor there really would have created a health and safety issue. I don't see that level of activity in downtown Gilroy, unfortunately. But if it gets there, a good thing. Then I think that would be a good time to bring back either a resolution or an amendment to the code.
And then if you recall at the last meeting, I sort of talked about, again, trying to find a way that we could help our businesses if, bottom line, we can't dictate where vendors can locate, but if we have the 48 inches in place where, they can't obstruct the sidewalk, and we talked about possible outdoor dining options to expand, these businesses to expand, right? Or tables, chairs, whatever it may be out there. When we think about that, is it possible for us to utilize, say, a facade improvement program or a permit fee abatement program to help these businesses kind of apply for these permits? If I'm a business and say, what, I want to be able to do what Settle Down Brewery did, right? Could these programs help those businesses sort of with that? Because there is a cost for the permit. I'm just trying to see how we as a city can help our businesses, if that's the way that they want to go.
If I'm recalling
Yeah.
correctly, it's been a little while, but I believe that there is a committee and an effort to look at the downtown, not only from a parking standpoint, but from a viability standpoint for the downtown. And I think a product like that would be a good one to come out of the efforts to take a look at the downtown and what can be done to help improve the vitality of it.
Right. No, I understand the downtown committee. I mean, obviously, I've championed that, but I guess the question is, when it comes to outdoor dining permits, could a facade program be utilized in a way to help pay for these permits? I don't know, Jimmy, if that's a question that you can help answer.
The council has a lot of flexibility in developing programs for economic stimulus.
Right.
So is what you're speaking of possible? Sure.
Okay.
Just like the facade program, it would be a council decision to create some kind of program for sidewalk vending or any kind of improvement and allocate funds.
I don't see how that's part of this ordinance, though, is it?
No,
Okay.
it's not necessarily, but I'm just trying to think,
I know, let's
Yeah.
just try to stick, because I would really like to see us progress, and if we try to bring too much in here. Did someone else have a question, or I'm going to go with another?
And I'll
Oh,
come
that's
back.
right, you had one too.
Well, no, I just have some other comments. Go
Okay,
ahead.
windows. Where is this addressing windows? So some restaurants, some of the ones that have recently opened, even some of the breweries, they're not, I don't know that you'd call it outdoor dining because they don't have tables outside, but they certainly have these windows that now, open completely. So it's completely open to the sidewalk. How is this restricting the presence of a sidewalk vendor right in that space?
The code doesn't. The only thing that we have to address a window or an opening in an existing business right now is the rule regarding generators or a vendor that is cooking with wood and
So
creating
again,
smoke or
that
steam.
to me is something that sabotages a business because we issue permits for them to build things this way that is clearly so that they believe it is an asset to their business and to attract customers and people would enjoy sitting there. And then we go and issue another permit for someone to actually be right in front with their whatever, even if it's not a generator or a barbecue. So I think are there ways around that? Because I know everything has to be a matter of health and safety, but I just feel like we need more help in getting to where we want to go, since obviously this is a conflict that we don't intend.
Again, going back to health and safety, since a lot of the buildings in the downtown and even in other commercial streets here in Gilroy do have large window openings, it's a little difficult, and I would be a little cautious coming up with a rule like that would really make it impossible for someone to get a sidewalk vending permit. We can certainly take a look at...
Not trying to make it impossible, just trying to say that we're trying to make both exist. So
Right.
doing something for one that's at the expense of another does not make sense. I don't mean competitive expense. I mean at the ability for them to use their own property the way they should be able to use it, that they're paying for, that they're...
I mean, on one hand, I want to, and I'm probably
Yeah.
going off base here.
Maybe
but
it's enough to the generators and the smoke thing,
could be.
without that.
Could be. But I see your concern because you do have some businesses that have invested in their building.
Yeah,
businesses
and that's a very
owners,
common
and
thing now, to have windows
it's-
that are seamless. They
it's-
just
it's-
completely
It's almost
open up.
more beneficial for them to, if let's say they just have an opening, to try and get an approval for some type of outdoor seating, because by the generator and smoke rule, they'd have to stay at least a certain distance away from that.
Well, why can't we also apply that same rule to windows that open up? Then
Maybe there is a way, because to keep generators and smoke generating distances a certain distance away from open or windows that open because of the health issues related to, for lack of a better word, secondhand smoke or exhaust fumes.
John, didn't the mechanical code, wasn't it pretty broad about openings to buildings?
I'd have to
I'm
defer
remembering,
to-
yeah, it was very broad. It was openings to buildings. So I would say a window, but I'm not the building official, but I just remember from the call the other day.
Okay. Okay, we can look.
Yes.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Sharon,
it is
but it's
the-
okay to look into later, too. I just wanted to point out that it's.
I'm going the wrong direction. So, yeah, so it is the language in the California Mechanical Code. It states that the termination of exhaust openings shall terminate at least 10 feet from openings into buildings, and openings would include doors, windows, any fenestration. And I think what John was trying to say is that that's tied to a generator. That's where the mechanical comes in, not just a
Right,
building
but
opening
we're not
itself.
limited to the mechanics code. Right, that
Right.
code.
Yeah,
This
that's
is a different
where,
situation. Right.
That's where we're finding the objective, health and
Okay.
safety reasons, rather than just, purely a building opening and, a vendor
Okay.
without a generator.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Klein.
Well, and I think we're stuck on 48 inches, but this would also keep people away, vendors away from these openings too, in the sense of I like the whole idea of the 50% of the sidewalk or 5 feet, because again, it covers
I do too.
a broad range, and talking about entryways, and you're 5 feet away, well, you're going to be away from windows too, in that sense. But if you're dealing with that takes it away for even further.
Do we have consensus on that one, everybody?
I think it's a no-brainer, just because our sidewalks are all stamped.
I agree.
So if there's 6 squares, they know they can only be in 3 of them.
Right.
Okay, so that, all right, so we all would like to use that Sacramento wording, or have staff look into
They can look into
the
it,
Sacramento
right.
wording for
And I can
that.
share what I have with you.
Okay.
It does, it makes it much more clear, and it solves the problem of where things are different, where measurements are different.
They also
Okay.
talked about, with the customers standing there blocking, they also have an item where they call it customer queuing. Permittees shall engage in sidewalk vending in a manner that does not require or encourage customers to interfere with or obstruct public right-of-ways, pedestrian pathways, or traffic.
I like that too. You guys?
It's a queuing, so that way they're
Okay.
not.
That one too?
Yeah.
I would like to go to public comment before we
We can-
do too much longer. Unless you have something new to raise.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and this is nothing to add. I'm just curious, so, again, just in this discussion, and obviously, when we look at, if and when this passes, obviously, it's going to limit a lot of what vendors can do, right? Hopefully for our businesses. But when we look at city-owned property or city-held events, I think maybe that's a way for us to encourage more vendors to relocate. Because I'm going back to what we talked about earlier. Can we mandate vendors to go to certain locations? But I think if we're proactive when we're having more city events and in a city, say the parking lot back here, I think that might help with kind of, relocating some of these vendors. So I bring that up. It's not part of the ordinance, but I'm just trying to think what else we can do here, because I think I'm hearing the same message about, trying to help our businesses here. So,
Yeah, I think the city, even though we may not be able at this stage to say vendors are limited to a certain location,
right.
the city can still offer a certain location to vendors and, provide maybe some type of incentive for vendors to go to these locations, or, some other way of encouraging them rather than setting up on one of the public streets. Maybe they can go there for, the light, the safety, the disposal opportunities for their goods and services. That's a door that's always open to the city. And like I said, it's, is there a way to attract vendors to those locations? I think most vendors are going to go where the opportunities exist, however. And there's establishments in the downtown that serve one product and not another product, so that's going to draw in folks that are selling food.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. There was another item that they have in there is adequate lighting required. No permittee shall engage in sidewalk vending unless there is an adequate lighting for customer safety and visibility. Permittees who use their own lighting shall direct the lighting downward and away from streets or adjacent properties. And another item that they had was vendors could be no closer than 100, I think it was 100 feet apart or 100 feet from each other. So they couldn't be any closer than that. So.
We will take a look at the Sacramento to see how they supported that. The only comment I'll make about the adequate lighting needs electricity, so that might trigger larger generators for the vending device.
But public safety, though, too. For that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I hear you. You don't want to solve one thing and
And
make another
You're
thing
right. No, I
worse
understand.
with that one. But 100 feet from each other would then limit the number
Right.
that could be. Yes?
I have a question for the fire marshal. Have you been downtown on a Friday or Saturday night and see what's going on?
No, I have
No?
not.
Well, I don't know how you can answer this question then. Because it's a mess downtown. The sidewalks are blocked. Some of the doorways are blocked. Capos that has a lot of people inside, they're blocking. If there was a fire, people wouldn't be able to get out. And I would like to know how you feel about that if you're the fire marshal.
Right, so with the exits, any of the exits shouldn't be blocked at all. And actually, part of this permitting program would position the vendors into a certain designated area such that there'd be less chaos. So, yeah, they shouldn't be blocking the exits. There should be at least 48 inches coming out of the building. And the way I see it, 48 inches along the sidewalks. That's the way I see it.
Okay.
I would encourage you and all staff members to go downtown so you can physically see it. I mean, that's a great question that Councilmember Dion Proctor was asking, but if our own staff is not down there to see it, then you can't relate to what the concerns are of our businesses. So, especially as our fire marshal, you should be out there finding out.
I'm going to interrupt and ask that we not criticize staff.
I'm not criticizing. I've never criticized staff. I'm just saying. I'm not
one
criticizing
individual,
staff.
the fire marshal who has not gone up there doesn't mean the other staff has not. So I do wish that we keep our questions to questions about the ordinance and not telling.
Well, I don't appreciate you interrupting me because I am not criticizing staff.
Okay.
I'm making a comment that we should have staff go down so they can see it physically.
Councilmember, but I'm just going to say what was crossing my mind is what staff would see is not what we allow. It's because we have not yet enacted an ordinance that staff can enforce. So that's what we're here to do. It's not. We don't need them to see how bad it is without the ordinance. We know it's bad. That's why I didn't want to wait from July 10th. I didn't want this to be something that was going to take months to do. That's why we're having this study session. So let's try to stick to this. And
yeah, no, I know. I just don't appreciate being saying
it's okay.
that I'm criticizing staff.
Oh, I thought you were done.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I think we need to look into why these other cities are able to say you can't be down there.
Yeah.
I called several cities and asked them how come they don't seem to have this issue. They go, we don't allow it.
Yeah.
If they show up, they're told to leave. And I think we're missing a huge opportunity to take and try to put these folks in a location where you can have food trucks and these vendors and stuff. They do it in San Jose, and people from Gilroy drive to San Jose to go up there to eat off of all these different vendors because they're all in one spot. And I think it's something that we should really look at because I think it's an opportunity for us to draw more people into our downtown that normally won't go to the brick and mortar restaurants. But if we get them downtown, they may start trying them. You know, I think we're missing an opportunity, and I think I want to know how these other cities are able to do what we're told we can't do. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. You're good. Okay. One last thing I want to ask, and I'm not sure, before I go to public comment, then I want to go to public comment, you may not know if Los Gatos has this, but is it allowable for cities to not permit drinking establishments without also serving some sort of food?
I believe that it is allowable. I can't recall.
We used to allow it like that.
Allow, you mean?
It's the ABC
We don't,
license.
we do it like that now.
It's,
Yeah, it was a rule we put in.
Jimmy wants to chime in too, but I think it's the ABC license. There's there's alcohol with food. That's one license, and the kitchen has to be open. Then there is just alcohol, and that's a bar license. And I think there's like several different licenses with the ABC that we don't control.
But I'm not asking about ABC. I'm asking about the city of Gilroy.
The city of Gilroy does not provide licenses for alcohol sales. It is ran by the state through the Alcohol Beverage Control Division, and depending on many factors, including what type of alcohol you sell, what % of beer you sell, and what % of your total sales come from the sale of alcohol, determines what some of the food requirements may be. I don't know that we're qualified or understand exactly how the state determines that. But whenever a business goes through the process, they apply to the state mandates what they have to do in order to sell the alcohol.
Can we find out?
Sure.
Yeah, because I'm being told by one of the downtown business owners that the city of Los Gatos does not allow businesses that serve alcohol to not serve food.
Serve food.
And if that's true, that, might help too.
Well, Mayor, no, thank you for bringing that, but I'm trying to understand how this relates to the vendors.
Because if we didn't do that, it wouldn't attract so many vendors right outside these doors.
Right.
Because they're there to feed the people who can't get food inside of the beer establishments or wherever they are.
Yeah. Okay.
And in some cases, being asked to be there by that business owner.
Got it.
Because they want their customers to stay longer and drink more, and they want the food out there. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Part of the permit process with them, they would show where they want to set up, correct? And so you'll address that through that process
The
with
vendors?
them. Yes.
Yes. We
Yes.
are anticipating a handout to them that they will be able to use that will demonstrate where they're going to be setting up and the distances from various city facilities, the entrances, exits to buildings, and so forth.
Okay. Okay. Do we have public speakers?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have 4 public speakers. The first is Jeff Orth, followed by Dan Nelson, followed by Gary Walton, followed by Annie Palmer.
Okay. If all of you could please, be ready.
All right. Do I have 3 minutes? Mm-hmm. Oh, come on. Give me a break, Marie. Okay, first of all, I want to give you a point of clarification. All the trees that have electricity have a lock on them, so unless you have a key to open them up, you're not going to get free electricity from the city. Up until you first started today, I was starting to get kind of agitated over there because I thought, geez, the city council, they're solving for the wrong problem. You need to keep the main thing the main thing. You need to figure out what you want for your downtown. And I think what we want is one that's safe, that's clean, that's inviting, it's attractive to individuals, families, and businesses, and then keep that in the main framework of all the decision-making you make for the downtown. And then later on, I started to hear that you started to share the same concerns that I do with having these street vendors downtown. The other thing I would say, too, is if the state may have mandates, but as city councilmen and as leaders of our community, you need to summon enough courage. I'll quote General Patton, who says, you got to be careful about being too careful. And so when it comes to street vendors, I admire their entrepreneurism. I actually would encourage vendors. I just don't think they're appropriate on Monterey Street because it's inconsistent with clean, safe, and inviting. They have to follow the same rules and give them good places to go. So we're not telling them that they can't go anywhere. We're giving them great places they can go. We're already developing Gourmet Alley. Let's help keep that in mind as we develop Gourmet Alley. We got Railroad Alley. Let's keep that in mind. We've got a parking lot that's across from the Center for Performing Arts. It's owned by the city. That might be a location for what I call, what Barbara and I experienced when we were in South Korea, were the night markets. And they were really nice, and people, and Dion is right about that. Councilman Bronco is right about that. People will turn out for those kind of things. I think, so that's one of the things you want to be thinking about. And then the other thing, too, is you can make all the rules and all the laws that you want to do, and it doesn't mean squat. It doesn't mean a single thing. You can talk about this ad nauseum, but unless the enforcement actually takes place, and that's where I think we've been coming up really short in the city oftentimes, is we'll put together a really well-intentioned ordinance, a really well-thought-out ordinance, and then we just don't enforce it. The other thing I want you to do, and I'm not sure where I'm at on time, okay, differentiate between outside dining and an environment where you're preparing food. See, when you have a restaurant and you have some tables out front, that's not causing the problems that a place that's preparing food would cause. So one of the things you might consider, and I thought Marie had a really good idea there when she was talking about how when you open the windows and how a vendor right in front of a place that had windows would be really bad. Well, either encourage or maybe incentivize the business owner to have tables out front.
Next speaker. Thank you. What's that? I'm sorry.
Dan Nelson.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Dan Nelson here with Tempo Kitchen and Bar. Appreciate you guys addressing this issue. I know it's a pretty serious one and very time consuming. I could spend a lot of time talking about what I think is very serious safety and health issues with being downtown. In 3 minutes, I can't do it, but I've been sending kind of correspondence and feedback with what my opinion is, and I think I share that opinion with quite a few restaurants in downtown. Obviously, addressing what Dion mentioned earlier, done a lot of research on it, and a lot of concern from a safety perspective. If there is an emergency, if there's a fire, looking at capos, looking at our place, looking at pretty much every downtown establishment, even though that's a situation that probably would rarely happen. If it did happen, it'd be chaos with food vendors and everything going on. So I think that alone, I think, is a very serious thing you have to take a look at. I addressed, I know it's not the most popular thing, but I addressed looking at a third location or second location to be together. I think it has so many advantages that you would avoid any potential safety issue, any potential health issue. There's just so many advantages of looking at another location. I think you guys should really seriously look at that. And again, absolutely, cities are doing it all over the state. They're getting away with it somehow. I'm sure they're not breaking the law. I think they're finding loopholes or finding ways that make sense. I'm certain that's the case. So I think this committee should really seriously look at some of those situations and kind of divert their energies on that. Now, it might be late in the game because you guys are already looking, at downtown and what regulation you can have there, but I think it's going in the wrong direction, in my opinion. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next.
Gary Walton.
Thank you. I prepared some comments, and I'll just submit those for the public record after I'm done here. But basically, there's good parts about this. I started out with each of us as a fundamental right to realize an idea, create something of value, and pursue our entrepreneurial spirits. So there's a number of items along those lines that are important. The bad, I listed those. There's health and safety concerns, unfair competition, loss of revenue, loss of consumer protection. And really what I think is a big thing is the urban aesthetics of the public space. It's very crowded down there. We have way too many street vendors out there that could be improved. I think the changes that have been made were good changes. There are some items that I think could be tweaked a little bit. I don't know what I did with them, but for example, like a car will overhang a curb. It doesn't stop at the curb, it overhangs. So some cities have an 18-inch minimum clearance from the curb so that a car does not bump either a person or their equipment. The other thing, I think in terms of where it goes, I didn't see anything about being in front of an ATM machine. Well, we have an ATM machine. Do you feel comfortable punching your numbers in with all these people standing right there? I mean, maybe that should be included as well. There should be a distance between each vendor. Right now, they're shoulder to shoulder. You can't even get through. If you park your car, you can't even get through because it's one after another, after another, after another, particularly around capos. And a lot of cities have distances between each vendor. So if you're parking there, I mean, you should have a right to access the sidewalk, in between where those vendors are. I think there should be no deep frying allowed, no barbecues, anything that produces wood or smoke. Covered a lot. I think the fire department needs to review where they're going to go. I think you can limit the number. You can limit the number. It's not unlimited. I think the state law allows you to limit the number. Otherwise, you're going to have all the sidewalks from 3 blocks full of vendors, and I don't think that's what you want. So anyway, there was a bunch of other little stuff I had in there, and like I said, I'm going to submit these. I don't know how much time I got left anyway, so I'll just submit it for the public record. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Annie Palmer.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. I've looked at a lot of different cities.
Maybe pull the microphone a little closer.
Yes, looked at different cities' programs, or I'm sorry, not programs, but the rules and regs that they've developed for the street vendors. And I think, it all started in Los Angeles, and I think they've set up some really good protocols and regulations. You were talking about being in front of a building. They basically said that you have to be 20 feet away from an entrance, that the vendors can't set up in front of the building. They have to set up from the curb, 18 inches from the curb forward. So that would prevent them from being in front of someone's windows. They also indicated distances between fire hydrants and light fixtures and that. And they did a really great diagram on where you could and couldn't, which would be helpful to everyone. And I know the City of Los Angeles said 3 feet between vendors. City of San Diego has 10 feet between vendors, and other cities have larger distances. But I do think that it's important for us to put certain distances between things, and then also let them know that they can't be, right now they're in vestibules in front of buildings. They need to be from the curb, 18 inches from the curb this way into the building. So anyway, please take a look at Los Angeles's recommendations and rules, and I appreciate your time for hearing me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another speaker?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we actually have 2 left. Mercedes Little, followed by Jeannie Rizzuto.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time out to do this special study session. I think it's awesome. I've been told by many naysayers that everything's slow in government and it doesn't work well. So this is awesome, honestly. I wanted to show this picture. Maybe, Fred, you can pass it down to everybody. But this was from Friday night. My printer's super slow, so I didn't have an opportunity to print out a whole bunch of them. But this is just showing a bag of charcoal, tables, food being prepared out in the open. My husband and I have done several outdoor permits through the city of Santa Clara, or county of Santa Clara, rather. And to make a long story short, there's a lot that goes into it. We also served at Friday Night Music Series in Morgan Hill, out in the amphitheater, and we had the fire department come out and check us. We were deep frying. We were using a grill with propane fuel. There was a lot of rules and regulations that we had to do and distances that we had to maintain in order for safety for people just walking by. And if anybody's been to Friday Night Music Series, it's pretty packed. So in terms of what happened Friday night, it's a regular occurrence. We all know what's going on. We don't need to be talking about it over and over again. I think that all of the components that are in these new red lines are awesome. We just need to push forward and kind of put it in stone and then maybe revisit it after we've had it in action for like maybe 6 months and say, the end of 2023, this is how it worked. And maybe we need to change a few things. But we can't put it all in one and make everybody happy. But if we can make sure that people are operating business as a business and not because I want to help you. If I'm going to operate my business legally and honor that code, then everyone that wants to operate a business in the city of Gilroy should do the same. And in terms of how downtown Gilroy needs to be, we're on the right track. We need to gentrify. We need to increase our optics, make it look beautiful, have people want to come down. There's Movable Feast, Food Truck Mafia, for example, if you've ever heard of them. They create basically like a wagon, I don't know. They put all the food trucks in a circle, and then they put little buckets for people to come and sit, and the families see it when they're driving by, like, oh, I'm going to go get something to eat. So we could do something like that in a lot of different places downtown, like Gary said, Jeff said, and that would help. It's not kicking them out, but having them in downtown Gilroy right straight off of Monterey Street, it really ruins the opportunity that we have to really grow this city in an amazing way. So I thank you for your time, opportunity, and if there's anything that we can do as business owners to help you guys, we're here. We're ready for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Just checking on that.
It's the same
There's
3
nowhere
minutes.
else where
No.
it doesn't show you anywhere else here the time.
Is it not in front of you here?
Not in front of me.
Oh.
It's over on the other
Yeah,
screen, but not in
right.
front of me. First of all, like Mercedes had said, thank you for having this workshop and letting everybody to come forward and express their opinion. And also, I think you're right on track in a lot of things that were shared tonight, especially Council Member Dr. Bracco, in regards to having the vendors in one location. A lot of us have been to other cities that have done this, and it's been spectacular. And I think we're not trying to push the vendors out. I think that would only help and increase their business with that. Secondly, Dave Liao couldn't be here tonight. He's on vacation, but I don't know if he sent to you, but he has pictures of after several different evenings on Fridays and Saturdays where there was food, grease that was in front of his new building there by Gilroy Bowl, as well as in front of Capo's, and kind of back to that health and safety issue. Third is really what we want for our city, like Jeff Orth had shared. We're looking to have people feel safe, it's lighting, it's clean, and it's inviting in going through with that. So I think if we stay on this same track of working together, of we're not pushing out the vendors, we have a location for them, but downtown needs to be separate from that. I think one of the other things is with the Sharks coming into town, there's going to bring a lot more people that are going to be introduced to Gilroy for the first time. And we want to make a good impression. So those people that are coming from San Jose and other areas, they want to invest in our downtown. And I think by having a lot of the vendors up, that is deterring from that. As a property owner, if I'm going to be selling my building and it happens to be a restaurateur and they see that, that's going to be a lot more difficult challenge to have with that and going through. And we want to get more than the 1% of Gilroy population coming downtown and enjoying our downtown with that. And then lastly, when there was talked about safety and the queuing, if you haven't been downtown, a lot of other times there's a lot of lines and it's very difficult blocking the sidewalk. My dad is 93. I know Marie knows my father. It's challenging for him to have to go off the curb, in the street, back around and going through. So that's a safety concern. So I really appreciate you guys taking all these things into consideration. I think you're on the right track and going through with this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, are there any other speakers?
No other speaker cards, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Closing public comment. Coming back to council. I think what we want to do is go down a list of the things we want staff to, right?
Can we add anything else, or is this?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's a couple of other items in it. again, referring to Sacramento, they had, what other restrictions on sidewalk vending are there? Sidewalk vendors are not permitted to operate within 400 feet of a school between the hours of 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. on school days. Sidewalk vendors are not permitted to operate within 600 feet of any entertainment establishment, example, clubs, within the hours of 10 p.m. and 2:30 a.m. And sidewalk vendors are not permitted to operate within 300 feet of special event or outdoor market. I think we already have that in there.
We don't have the hours one, though, do we?
No. So that addresses like events like Compost, special
Yes.
event, and other places. They can't be within 600 feet between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2:30 a.m. And I know another item in the permit process, let me find it here. Excuse me for this. Stationary sidewalk vending requirements, except for as provided in this chapter, no permittee with a stationary sidewalk vending permit shall engage in sidewalk vending from any other location other than the location on a public sidewalk or other pedestrian path for which the permit is granted. So they pretty much have to stay
I think that is in here.
They're not allowed to move somewhere else. So,
Right, I think we do have that in here.
If we do, that's good.
Yeah, that the permit is just for the particular site and the particular person. It can't be somebody else, and it can't be at a different spot.
And the other thing, I know we're kind of focused on the challenges with downtown and what we're facing, but this, if I'm correct in understanding this ordinance, it's for the whole city, correct?
Yes.
And so how do we handle sidewalk vending on private property? Like we have on Monterey, at some of these spots where the vendors are out there on that, quote, private property. How do we handle that? How is that addressed?
Those would be subject to a mobile vending permit, which we have Chapter 16A of the code requires that they get a permit from our police department to operate on a private parking lot, for example, or in the public street.
If they're stationary or
either stationary or mobile.
So it addresses
both of those.
Yeah, and they would fall under this criteria anyway, too, correct? In the sense as a vendor.
No, this only applies to vendors that are operating in a city park, a public sidewalk, or a public pathway.
The way Sacramento handled it, and maybe that's different, they mentioned sidewalk vending on private property. No permittee shall engage in sidewalk vending on private property without the private property owners or occupants' consent. No permittee shall engage in sidewalk vending on private property if the location from which the permittee operates is not paved with concrete, asphalt, or other similar material. And while vending on private property, permittees shall comply with the applicable provisions of this chapter. So, but I don't know, maybe if you already have it addressed there, that takes care of that.
I think it's addressed in the code, and it's pretty explicit that this is only for public sidewalks, pathways, and parks.
Okay, so do you have a question?
No.
Okay, so like we did on July 10th, can we just go through all the things that we're asking staff to look into so that it confirms that there is all four of us, because it takes all four of us at this point?
Mayor, can I ask a question before we start? It sounds like we're going to start voting on this, right?
Yep.
Okay. And the question, thank you to the public who came out and spoke, but if and when, hopefully, this passes, I guess the unanswered question is, how is this going to be enforced? What's our plan for it being enforced? Because it's great to have this, but if we're a city that's reactive and not proactive, what changes is it going to make?
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tovar. We have discussed enforcement, and we will finalize an enforcement plan when we come back with the final permitting fees that will happen in September. We do not have the in-house capability right now to go out every night and enforce this. So we will have to have a targeted education program, which is really the key to enforcement, is letting people know what they can and can't do. And then doing routine inspections and also the involvement of the police department, because we have tried to enforce some of these issues before, and without the support of police, our code enforcement officers simply just get ignored or told to go away. So we'll come back with a more detailed explanation for council when we return in September with the permit fees.
Yeah. And thank you, Jimmy, for that. But again, I just want to make sure I'm clear, and I want the public to be clear about this as well, and I think it was just stated that we don't have the bandwidth in-house to enforce this on a daily basis. So, it can come back where even though we have this, doesn't mean it necessarily is going to work because we don't have the capability. So I think as a council, we need to think sort of outside of the box how we can make this happen on a routine basis and not maybe once a month. So that's for another discussion, but I just want people to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I do think this is going to be a step-by-step process. We first have to enact an ordinance, and then we have to see what comes of it, see what the next steps are. I mean, I don't see how we're going to possibly get anywhere. The only other thing is to do nothing, and we have what we've got. That is certainly unenforceable, or we don't have the manpower to enforce. We have to hope that there are a lot of vendors out there that want to comply. They just need to know what they're supposed to comply with. And that they are willing to take advantage in the meantime is a different story. That's the way it is. But the truth of the matter is they don't have specific guidelines because we haven't given them yet. So that's what we're trying to do and hope that this will help. So, okay.
And I can say, in just going through different cities and looking at, like, again, Sacramento, Morgan Hill, Sacramento, they have the regular ordinance, but they have a fact sheet, and it's very simple. So that's just to encourage staff, coming up with a fact sheet that's very simple with the bullet points of what this is all about, how you do it, and how it's enforced. I know Morgan Hill has something similar, colorful, both in Spanish and English. I know we do that already that way. But making it easy for the public, that person, whoever's doing that, having a fact sheet or something along those lines that simplifies understanding how it's done.
Okay. So I can do this the way I did it on Monday, or I don't know, Jimmy, if you were taking notes, do you want to go through it, and then we'll just chime in with the things that we're missing, or do you want me to go through? Okay, I'm happy to do that. And so I'm just going to get the ones that I get, and then you guys are going to chime in with the things that were missed, okay? Yeah. Or that you still have. So I'm starting with the proposed ordinance as redlined now. And I'm going to section B, 16B.3A9. That's the first one that I think we all want to see a much greater distance when it comes to generators or things that have smoke. We want it as far away as possible.
Can we not allow generators?
Well, that's what I was told we can't do. So, okay, guys, no, sorry.
I don't recall that we said you can't do generators. I recall that you need to get approval to operate a generator, or have that as part of your...
Okay, so can we say generators and things that produce smoke are not permitted?
We could look into that, but, I mean,
okay,
aren't these people cooking, and is this an unnecessary barrier? That's what I was...
Okay, so let's do this then, because staff's going to look into this. So I want to confirm that the council majority here, that the four of us, would like staff to return with, first, can we disallow generators, smoke-making things, and deep fryers? Because that does make a mess. That is a big part of the problem. People can get burned. If we don't have to allow those things, I believe all four of us would prefer to not allow them. If we do have to allow them, then they need to be a much greater distance than 10 feet. Whatever is the maximum distance staff believes is permissible by law.
And I like that. I think you're right in saying that, Mayor. If it is allowable, what exactly is allowable? Because, I mean, it could be different types of, and that'll help us try to shape what we're looking to do.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one thing. Okay? Good. And that includes, by the way, not just the entrance, but windows of a building, too. Right. The open windows, I mean, there. I suppose somewhere in there, do you need to say may not use, just to be clear, that no sidewalk vendor may use electrical outlets of the city?
Right.
Okay, so just so that it's clear and that it's in there. All right. Under number 21, that the 48-inch thing be replaced with, staff look into the Sacramento ordinance that uses 5 feet or 50% of the sidewalk, whichever is greater, and that it also clearly define what is the starting point of measurement. Right. Like some of our speakers were saying, it needs to start from the curb or 18 inches from the curb if you're going to allow for the front of a car to go over the curb, and then towards the building. It doesn't start at the building. Right?
Might want to go measure some cars out in the parking lot and see if 18 is enough. I don't think it is. I think my vehicle hangs out more than 18 inches.
So we're asking staff to consider the overhang of cars, whatever that amount is, right, in these measurable distances, and that the start of where a sidewalk vendor can locate is that distance from the curb, and then measured to make sure there is no more than 50% of the sidewalk or 5 feet or the maximum from the building.
Mayor, can I ask a question here? Just want to make sure what we're talking about right now, because one of the things, we're talking about, measurements, obviously, and we're looking at, being ADA compliance, obviously, right? But then you have, what's the distance between, I believe this was addressed, but I just want to make sure, what's the difference between a parked car and a vendor, right? If I'm parking my car and the vendor's right in front of me and I don't have access, isn't that, violating ADA compliance? Does that make sense? I mean, because we're talking about the sidewalk, but then if we have people who are disabled people who are parking and you have vendors and they can't get out for whatever reason, I mean, shouldn't that be taken into consideration as well?
Well, I'm thinking about the separation distance between a normal parking space and the one next to it. It doesn't seem like that. The ADA or accessible handicap spaces are certainly provide those distances, but a regular space, I don't believe that falls into that. It's a similar situation.
Yeah, see if there's something
I don't know
on that,
how we would quite address that.
Yeah, because I bring that up because I had a disabled person reach out to me about that, and so there was concerns about that. So if there's something you can find on that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Council direction.
Are you clear?
Yeah.
Do you feel clear enough?
Okay,
and we all support. Okay, those distances. Customer queuing. Councilmember Klein, you read something about customer queuing being affected, or being included, or however that was worded.
Right.
I don't know if again you want to supply that. Both staff can look at. I mean, you're getting this from the. Okay. But whatever the wording was that you read from Sacramento with respect to customer queuing should definitely be in here too, because that absolutely is part of the space that's occupied by a sidewalk vendor. Maybe. I was talking about 21 and the 5 feet and the greater than 50% or 5 feet, but I didn't know. Was this the place for customer queuing, too? I don't know.
No, I think that would be a separate standard.
Probably make it a separate. Yeah, make it a separate one. As long as it's in the ordinance that is part of the space being occupied.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really what needs to be clear. Okay, I don't particularly support the adequate lighting thing. Does anybody else want to say that they do? Just because I think it's going to encourage generators or trying to access electricity.
Yeah, there's no generators and no electricity.
Yeah, I'm going to hope that you find a way that we don't have to allow generators or smoke or deep frying.
Okay.
Well, and I know with our lighting that's down, well, and again, we're just referring to downtown, we should think about the city as a whole, this ordinance applying, so, yeah. And it might be because of that fact, they would bring something to create, so, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll let that one go for now. 100 feet from each other. Did I hear you say that?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
A minimum.
Is that something
Because
staff
it could be a minimum. We
could
could
please
look
look into and see if we
Do
can?
that? Right.
And we are a council majority here, and so we are asking you to please be aggressive with what you come back with. It must absolutely not be okay.
Right. If it's not, if it's not okay, what would be okay? I mean, if it's not.
Well, of course, that's
yeah,
what they're, yeah. But it would be great to be able to say you can't be within 100 feet of each other. That would be.
I saw it somewhere else,
That's
and
at least
I can't remember where it
a
was.
reasonable distance,
Right.
to not have it just packed.
I think I saw 200 feet in another location as far as another city, so it depends.
Okay. And then, can a business exist downtown? Is this something within the city's ability to legislate or to is it within our jurisdiction to not allow drinking establishments that do not serve food
Got that.
of any kind? You got that?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm not suggesting that it need to be a kitchen. It doesn't have. I'm not suggesting it need to be a kitchen. You can serve food without there being a kitchen.
Right.
You can bring in ready-made sandwiches or something, but a way that your establishment does not create the problem of needing somebody to locate right outside your doors to serve food to your customers.
And that
Understood.
would be new businesses going forward. It wouldn't be existing.
I suppose, whatever it has to be.
Well, let me ask this
It's
question.
just we're learning.
Right.
We're learning a problem that we didn't think we had.
Right. In piggybacking on that question, currently, doesn't the city offer a conditional use permit that allows breweries to operate without food?
It does, yes.
Right. So I'm trying to
So that
see
permit is conditional.
Right.
So we could. It doesn't have to be just new businesses.
Right. So,
Well,
no.
if they have a valid use permit,
Right.
it runs with the land, and unless they're a nuisance or causing problems, we can't bring it back for revocation
Right.
or amendments.
That's the issue, right?
It doesn't expire, and then you change the condition.
No, and it won't change, and it won't
Okay, well,
change
then that answers
with
that.
ownership.
Okay.
Yeah, I hate to bring it up, but I just want to make sure that.
No, that's why we're here.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
Back years ago, bars used to have frozen sandwiches in a microwave, and that met their requirement. This council, our council then, the chief of police came to us because there was a problem downtown with fighting in the bars and stuff. So this was one of the measures that we enacted to try to change the behavior downtown by making the bars have to have food. It didn't make sense, but we did it anyway.
By making them have to have food.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which some of them made deals with restaurants and stuff. And it was a way, our council didn't want to allow any more bars to open downtown. Because I'm sure you remember, we used to have a lot of bars that just were bars downtown. And that's kind of where that came from.
But what I'm hearing you say is that you made the requirement for food to exist. There was
to
a.
make it hard for someone to open a standalone bar.
Okay, so why isn't that still the case today? Why do we have so many breweries that are open without any food?
Because the laws change that now permit that
Because
type
what?
of establishment.
They don't do that the same as a bar, I don't think.
Oh, a brewery is not a bar.
That was to my point, and I'm not an expert on ABC, but different types of alcohol, if it's brewed on site, if it's not brewed, triggers different requirements. So I think we hear council pretty clearly that you just want to know what is possible.
Right.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
we'll sort out the ABC stuff for you and bring you back the information.
Yeah, and that's why
Okay.
I bring up the conditional permit, because I want to make sure
Okay.
that we're, yeah.
Okay, so you're going to come back with what is possible on that. All right. When there's a bank ATM outside, are these, how are these being considered? When if we have a, whether it's a bank, I don't know what else there could be. I mean, what else? I can't think of anything besides a bank ATM, but are they allowed to block a customer's access to an ATM?
They possibly would be. The only alternative is through the permitting process, we can impose conditions to address the specific elements that present themselves. So, but we can put something in the code that says they have to be a certain distance from an ATM.
Yeah, I think I think that's only fair. I mean,
It's a safety
Heritage
thing.
Bank is downtown.
Right.
Pinnacle Bank is downtown. I don't know that Pinnacle has an ATM, but I think Heritage does.
Right.
And
Well, and it goes
they
to
aren't there thinking that the city would do something that prevents their own customers from using their
Right.
ATM. So I would think that we would protect that
yeah,
by,
it could be a safety issue. So yeah, it'd be nice to know if that's.
that's considered. And then what about sidewalk vendors not being able to operate after 10:30 is basically what you
It
would,
was 10 to 2:30, 10 p.m.
10 p.m.
to 2:30 a.m.
okay, well, 2:30.
The only caveat to that is that the state legislation says you can't, unless it's a health and safety,
Right.
for health and safety reason, you can't impose any restrictions on the hours that you're not imposing on other businesses within a given block. So
Yeah,
maybe
the
that's,
same businesses on the same
This is
street.
Sacramento, though. It's in their wording.
It's in their
So
backyard.
I'm just going by what they have. So if they can do that, then why?
and they might have something in their codes that
Right.
helps explain
Okay.
why they were able to do that. And that's
Okay,
what
so
we
that's
will
that's
look
the
into.
answer, is if you could look at Sacramento's code for those hours and find out what it is about that allows it to be okay in Sacramento, but not okay in Gilroy. Okay. Historical.
Which number are we?
Is any portion of our downtown as a downtown actually officially registered as historical, or is it just certain buildings? And I asked the question, let me tell you why I'm asking before you trouble yourself with answering it, is because Sacramento also has a section that says in this historical area, Old Town, street vending is not allowed at all. And so I would like to know, with the support of the council, if the rest of the council also wants to know, have staff come back and tell us why Gilroy's downtown, some portion of it, 1 block of it, 2 blocks of it, 3 blocks off of it, if any, can't qualify as Sacramento seems to for its Old Town.
It's because it's considered, yeah.
Let's look into that.
Okay.
And
That's
going
enough
back
to say
the
that.
Hours of as far as 10 p.m. to 2:30, they have in their code also hours of operation. It says, except as otherwise provided in this chapter, a permittee may only engage in sidewalk vending during the hours of operation of adjacent businesses or uses on the same street. So they tie that, and I think that's where they tie in the 10 p.m.
Okay, so that we can do, right?
Yeah, the state law says you can't change if the business, the brick and mortar business is open, you can't make the vendor not be during those
Correct.
hours. And I think,
He's talking about the reverse, though.
yeah, and so then also this was, my notes say that it was in an entertainment zone, or the 600 feet was, or just 10:30 to 2 a.m. in all districts.
Well, it just said e.g. clubs.
Yeah.
Example of clubs is what deferred to 10 p.m. to 2:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Okay,
that-
but I think what we're asking, though, is if we can limit sidewalk vendors to having to close not later than the businesses that they are near have to close, right? Isn't that how we're saying it? In other words, if Tempo Restaurant is closed at 10 o'clock, there can't be any vending, right? That's what we're saying. Then there can't be any vending.
But I like that. But also, then you look at, say, Temple closes at 10 o'clock, but then you have a club like Copples that's open till 2. So does that exclude vendors from being able to be there as well. I'm just trying to figure out what that means. I mean, if it's restaurants or if it's, any sort of business. Because I think, as you know, no, I know, I think that's the question, because as you know, Couple's been having a big issue with that, so.
Well,
Okay.
and I think that would address that in that sense, because after 10 p.m., they'd have to move.
Yeah, they just move.
Okay, so then we're asking you to look into and come back with what, I guess it is an hourly restriction.
Right.
How could we impose an hourly restriction that is absolutely fair, that is the
Mm-hmm.
same as what's going on with the other businesses downtown, not one that is different
Right.
than what's there, but one that works with what's there.
Could I ask this question? Is Campos being open, special events basically, right, to 2 a.m., but that's not every Saturday? My other question is, how many restaurants are open beyond 10 p.m. right now in downtown?
Restaurants?
Yes.
I don't think any. I think it's just what I was calling bars, but
bars.
Drinking establishments.
So that's a whole different
Just
issue.
alcohol
That's a whole
establishments.
different issue to address if you're talking about that we don't need to address tonight, but talking about closing downtown at a certain time. But that we can revisit that at another time.
No, I was just, if all the food service closes, if all the restaurants do close at 10, can we make the sidewalk vendors also close at 10?
That's the question.
No.
Why do they have to stay open to the time, why are they tied to the time of the bars? No, Jeannie, we
Yeah.
can't, I'm sorry.
That's the question that we need answer.
So you're asking, is it a requirement that they close by a certain time, or is it an election on the part of the business owner? Can we tie it to the elected closure time?
Yeah, we are looking for ways that we are looking for what we can do, not,
Yeah.
we're looking for what we can do. And I think we would like to, if all the restaurants are closed at 10, I think we would like all the mobile food service to also close at 10.
We just can't be more restrictive.
Right, but that's not being more
Right.
restrictive, so
But I
that's
like-
why I'm
right.
asking.
And I like what the mayor's saying, because right now we've been told we can't do this, we can't do this, but you're saying, what is it that we can do?
Yes.
So we can implement that, right? So let's
Right.
find out what we can do.
Okay.
Okay, that is my list. So what did I not include that somebody raised?
Madam Mayor,
Yep.
Mr. Klein's earlier written edits?
Oh, I'm fine, right. Councilmember Klein's earlier edits that came to us, I'm okay with all of those. You guys? Yes?
Save for the inclusion of that one definition that isn't found anywhere in the code?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Thank you, Member.
everybody good? Then, do I just need to gavel? Okay. All right, it is 7:32 p.m., and unless there are any other questions or any other comments from staff, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. We good?
Good.
All right. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good job. I know it's not easy, but good job.
Great. Appreciate it.